You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to another wonderful episode. We have Scott Walker as a guest. Scott is one of the world's most experienced kidnap for ransom negotiators and has probably one of the most difficult jobs in the world. He successfully negotiated more than 300 life or death incidents using the principles in his Sunday Times best-selling book, Order Out of Chaos. He now trains teams at all levels of an organization in his negotiation workshops and keynote talks. He's a regular contributor to the BBC, CNN, MSNBC, and his work has also been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, and the Harvard Business Review. Hey, Scott, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I'm fascinated with anything to do with negotiation, especially at the level that, you've done it with life and death. And, your book, I haven't read it, to be honest, because I like people to unfold their books while I'm speaking with them. So let's get stuck right into it. What is it that made you so good at these negotiations?
Well, that's a great question to start off with. It's down to practice. It's being able to be interested in people, being curious rather than making assumptions and judgments about people. And there's several moments in my life, I guess, the roles I had when I was a police officer and in the military, and then later as a kidnap negotiator. All of those gave me a ringside seat into the human condition, the human psychology. Why do we do what we do? Why do we think, feel, and act, particularly in times of stress, conflict, overwhelm, uncertainty? A bit like the times we're living in right now. And it was just a question of flying hours in terms of just the experience and the breadth and depth over the years of it didn't matter where I was in the world. It doesn't matter which culture, which nationality, which industry, which sector, that this experience, these situations, these cases, it kind of taught me some patterns and themes and what worked, what didn't work. And then gradually over the years, I realized these are so applicable outside of that gnarly life or death kidnap negotiation, for example. They apply just as much to the family dynamics when I was dealing with the families of the hostages as it was in the business setting over a boardroom table. And it was those themes and patterns I noticed. I thought there's so much crossover here. And, 15 years later, I kind of built up this muscle memory, and that's all it is of understanding why we do what we do and what we can do to influence and persuade and bring about some kind of cooperation or collaboration, regardless of whether or not that's in our personal life or professionally.
So you've built up what is unconscious capability. We start off with you had to try to do it. It sounds like now you can do this with your eyes closed, right?
Yeah, I still apply a beginner's mind, because the moment you think you've cracked it, the moment you think you're an expert, life will obviously show you otherwise. But there is a sense of trusting your intuition based on experience, based on knowledge and a skill set. But again, the comment I made at the very beginning was bringing more curiosity than assumption to the table, and realizing that negotiation isn't some kind of arcane magical art. It's simply a conversation with a purpose. And you and I and everyone else, all 7 billion of us, are doing it every single day, even if we don't realize it, because it's about bringing around some cooperation and collaboration. That's all it is, really.
And children are the best negotiators. They negotiate naturally.
I've sat down or spoken to, your kidnappers, your pirates, your extortionists, your terrorists, as well as, your business leaders and owners and teenage kids. And by far, the teenage kids are the ones that can provide the most challenge and an opportunity for growth, shall we say.
Okay, so tell me about some of these stories with all of the 300 episodes, how many of those did you like it went sideways? How many of those didn't work?
Well, touch wood, they all worked. There was
Oh,
some
wow.
where it nearly didn't work out.
Mm,
And it comes down to the success factor in all negotiation, particularly in these kidnappings, was trust.
mm,
Trust is the golden thread in business, in life. If you've got the trust in place, which takes time to build, time to establish, you can achieve far more. But
mm,
until you've got that trust, you're on shaky ground and things can fall away, can fall apart. And one of my very first cases, I hadn't spent the time building the trust enough with the family of the hostage, and they weren't
mm,
really listening to my advice. They weren't
mhm,
following the guidance, and their loved one was getting increasingly more at risk of harm because they weren't
mm,
doing what we wanted them to do.
mhm,
And rather than managing my emotions, rather than emotionally self-regulate, I got very blunt, very direct, very grumpy with the family. And I nearly had the shortest career in kidnap negotiation because I nearly blew it. And it was my
mm.
far more experienced colleague next to me who put his hand on my shoulder, interrupted my pattern, and then I watched a masterclass as to the process, the sequence to follow to get that cooperation and collaboration.
So, right, so it's always about not getting hot under the collar. That's not gonna work.
That is the number one skill of
Mm,
all the world's best negotiators is emotional self-regulation.
yes.
Because if you can't put yourself in the best possible state, how
Mhm,
are you going to influence and persuade somebody else? You have to be able to influence and persuade
mhm,
yourself first. You have to be able to be that calmness, that centeredness, that groundedness
mm,
in the center of the storm that's raging around. You know, you go on social media and it doesn't take very long before you get triggered by some kind of post, or you're in the boardroom somewhere and then a colleague or an ego driven boss will say or do something,
mm,
and you need to be able to not be a robot. You still feel those feelings, but you don't dwell, you don't linger in the pity party, and you don't
mm,
allow that emotional hijack
mhm.
to get in the way of you making some decent decisions.
This is so interesting because I teach my clients this how to neutralize their emotions. And I say it's almost like not being a robot, but it kind of is that you're neutral. They're there, you're not burying them. So there is a very large crossover between what you're doing and everyday life and business and everyday negotiations. So when you first started, you had a mentor that was teaching you how to get started with this. Now, what made them, how many negotiators are there that do what you do in Britain?
Well, worldwide, there's not very many. Outside of law enforcement, I got told
Hmm.
on day one of the training, and I'm not sure if this was just to smooth our egos or whatever, but they said the more people have been to the International Space Station than do what you do full time.
Mm,
And so whether or not that's true or not, I don't know, but
mm.
probably is. So not very many at all.
So you're the guy. They bring you in, and you're still doing this apart from all your other teaching?
Yeah, less so these days. I will advise maybe remotely or get some high level
Mm,
advice, but I've kind of stepped
mhm.
away from doing the on the ground negotiation and now just go and
Teach,
teach this
right.
in businesses around the world.
Wonderful. Okay, so what would you say is the number one thing, apart from being level-headed and neutralizing emotions and mastering them, what would you say the number one thing that works? Because you have a system, you had a system, neutralize, stay calm. You must have had like a playbook to go through to get the negotiation to go smoothly. So, what would you say the number one thing that's important in a negotiation? What's that one main thing?
If I had to say one thing, I would say don't rush to the finish.
Mm,
Now, that's relative, what that means, depending on the context. But one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is just rushing to problem solve.
mm,
Particularly when it's in personal relationships, you want to kind of, or within the workplace.
hmm
Yeah, you can get to that bit, but until you've realized, until you've identified what are the underlying emotions? What are the underlying needs that is driving this? Because outside of the outcome, signing the contract, for example, it's there's all these things like ego, saving face, being in control, certainty or significance, all these emotions that are there that unless we can identify and deal with them, they're going to get in the way. And until people feel seen, heard, and understood, not necessarily agreed with, but seen, heard, and understood, and that takes time, they're less likely to go, okay, then Scott, I'm going to agree to this deal. So it's taking the time to listen, to empathize, build rapport, and then you slowly earn the trust to then start about influencing, persuading, cooperating, and collaborating.
So people are jumping the gun. So with all your negotiations, that was your thing, was just to slowly win the trust of the hostage taker or the kidnapper.
Well, of the family and the client. In fact, dealing with the kidnappers was the easy bit. They're
Really?
just businessmen looking to get a good deal. But 80% of my time was spent on the crisis within the crisis. My own team, the family, the company, the high emotions, the competing priorities, the silo thinking, the egos again. That's where the challenge really lay.
So it wasn't with the kidnappers. The kidnappers, you could handle them. It's like, what do you want? They were going to get in trouble, though, the kidnappers, because how did you diffuse that situation where you got the person back?
Well, in law enforcement, obviously you're gonna arrest them. But in the wider world, in the private sector, where I did most of this, I was not interested in apprehending the kidnappers. My role was to support the family or the company to get their person back.
Back, yes.
That's it.
Because sometimes did you have to pay ransom to get them back?
Every single time I paid a ransom.
Oh, okay. So you did have to pay the ransom. So sometimes those people probably weren't arrested. They probably got away with it.
They got away with it more times than not. And actually, but I would never pay the ransom that was initially demanded. And that's the same in business. If someone says, I'm going to sell it for X or I want to buy it for Y, very rarely do you go, oh, okay, yep. Normally you want to go, well, actually, that's too much or that's too little. And then you want to kind of find a way that actually both of you walk away feeling as if you've got a reasonably decent deal. Because the last thing you want is people thinking metaphorically or literally that they've left money on the table.
Right. However, if you're part of the family and you want to get that family member back, you're probably going to be less likely to care about negotiating, right? You just want the family back, don't you?
Well, you may think that. It'd be reasonable to think that. But if say, there's $1 million demand, the family go, okay, yeah, we've managed to get $1 million in cash, let's pay it. I would say that's the worst thing you can do.
Because then they'll demand more.
They'll go, the kidnappers.
That was easy.
That was easy. And what normally happens is it's called doubling. They'll go, well, thanks for the down payment, thanks for the deposit.
Right.
Now we're ready to start negotiating. And if you've used up all your money, what have you got left? And what is likely to happen is the poor soul who we've managed to convince to drop the money off, the courier, he's going to get taken as a hostage as well. And we're in an even worse position. Plus, the kidnappers may go, okay, we'll agree to this. But next week, they'll kidnap another member of the family or another member of the company.
Has that happened?
Yeah, if people pay too much too soon, the kidnappers will see this as an easy payday for them.
Wow. So has it ever happened with one of your negotiations that they then went and kidnapped another family member because they got some payment?
No, because I always would embrace the conflict. I would put resistance in. And I say that in business, resistance and conflict are not bad things per se. You have to have the boundaries. You have to have your red lines. You have to go, again, metaphorically or literally, if you're leaving money on the table or you're paying over the odds, you're going to be walking away maybe a bit resentful or a bit disappointed or a bit frustrated. And then you're going to find reasons why you want to renege on the deal later on. So we have to make the kidnappers feel as if there's no more money left.
Right. That's it. You cleaned us out. You got the best deal ever because we're just barely scraping this together.
You got it.
Got it. Okay. Amazing. Now, how does that apply to business?
Well, in business, again, if you're going to pay too much too quickly, then it's not going to go down well, either internally, in the finance department, with your shareholders. And also, you can walk away thinking, we've been had over here.
Could have done better.
And then word's going to get around thinking, well, actually, they're not very good at negotiating. They pay too much. They pay over the odds. And so you're just going to get stung later on. But equally, you don't want to be, you can play tough. You can play a hard negotiations. But both sides must be able to walk away thinking they were okay to do business with. They were professional. They were courteous. Yeah, they drove a hard bargain. But both sides can feel as if they can go, do you know what? We're happy with this. Because, yeah, you can play hardball. You can rip people off once or twice. But ultimately, you want repeat business.
Right.
From a commercial perspective, I want that client to come back time and time and time again.
Yes.
And I want them to refer and recommend us to all of their circle, all of their friends and similar companies. And we only do that by building a reputation of being able to be trustworthy, reliable, likable even, good to do business with, where we don't pay over the odds, but we don't get had over. And so this just, again, it brings this credibility.
Right.
And that's important, particularly in the commercial world where reputation matters.
It does matter. It matters everywhere. Reputation matters in your personal life, your private, everything. Because I found that this is what I've found about negotiation. Some people are pretty good at it because you don't feel like they're just trying to rip everything off, right? But some people, I believe, that they think that good negotiation is nickel and diming. And they don't understand that that's not real negotiation. That's just creating ill will because they're like devaluing the other person. And that now has created an ill will kind of vibe, right? And I don't think they understand that good negotiation isn't always just about trying to get as cheap a price as possible.
Absolutely.
That's not it. Yeah. And that's what people think a good negotiation is. And yet it's not. Because the other person's feeling like you don't value at all because you're just ridiculously low, just thinking, let's see if I can get, it's like if you're going to buy a house. If you're going to buy a house, and you go and ask and say, hey, I'm going to offer half. That's not a good negotiation. That's just, let's see if we can totally rip these people off and see if they'll take half. But they're going to say no. And then they're going to be annoyed because you don't like their lovely house that they love, because most people are very attached to the houses they're selling. And then they're going to be like, well, I don't want to sell the house to you at all because that was just insulting, right?
Yeah, even if you offer the asking price, they're going to go, no, you try to have us over, you played us for a fool.
Yep.
You were playing games, not interested.
Right. And they always say, I've got nothing to lose. And I always just bristle when I hear that. You have a lot to lose. You have your reputation as a serious person, business person, buyer, whatever, because it's ridiculous. You've made yourself ridiculous because you think maybe you're going to win a lotto ticket, and that doesn't happen. But on the other hand, I feel like people could negotiate a bit where they might get, unless it's like a fixed price, then you shouldn't negotiate. If there's a price of something and everybody's paying that price, then it's just not fair if you're the only person that gets cheaper than all the other people that are paying it, right?
But it's a dance. You approach a negotiation like a dance. Both sides need to play the game of negotiation. You've got something I want, I've got something you want, which could even just be a nice word or a smile. You want to get an upgrade on a flight or whatever it is, or money off on something. You know what? If you're just polite and you're respectful, then actually that can go a long way, rather than I demand that you give me 20% off this.
Right. Well, nobody ever responds to those demanding people. You're just shut down. I know I do. I'm just, okay, I'm done. In fact, I don't even want this client now because they won't be easy to work with.
Yeah.
I think also, I think more and more, I find this more and more just after what the world's been through with, COVID and all sorts of stuff. I feel like people are valuing the relationship more now, that they'll pay more if they think it's going to be a good experience. I think the world's traumatized. And I feel like people will pay more if they just feel like the general experience is going to be better and harmonious and a nice feeling. I think they actually pay more just for that
Yeah.
experience. Would you agree?
Yeah, because there's less cognitive dissonance, there's
Mm,
less internal conflict or rub there. Is
mm,
all of us are just looking to avoid pain as well as move
mm,
towards pleasure. And if doing business with you for a similar kind of price point, or even more actually, but the
mhm,
experience is better,
mhm,
it's more enjoyable. There's less resistance. I feel as if I'm getting more value.
mm.
Then that goes a long way. It's
Yeah,
not always the best product or service that wins, but it's the one that's marketed the best and conveyed the best to the consumer, to the customer.
right. Absolutely. So now, how many companies are you consulting and coaching and teaching at the moment?
Many, many. I mean, right
Many.
now
Oh, wow.
there's probably about a dozen that I'm working with actively.
Mm,
But yeah, looking forward to continuing that. And what I've really found since I kind of stepped away from doing the day-to-day negotiations is actually transferring this and sitting down with them in a room, these teams and organizations, teaching them the principles, the tools, the techniques, the strategies that they can have better conversations, better negotiations, and that can materially make a difference to the bottom line, to the team culture, to whatever it is, to
mm,
the hiring process, for example.
mm,
So whether it's the HR teams, whether it's sales or business development, there's a role there that you don't have to be a traditional negotiator per se because we're always doing it. We're all communicating.
mhm,
But it's those teams that are really looking to, close a deal or build something internally as well that seems to
mm.
benefit from this.
So tell me about your childhood. Were you good at negotiating in your childhood? Was there something that they saw in you? Because there's not many people doing this. So what did your superiors see in you that they said, "Hey, he's the guy. We're going to train him." What was your childhood like? Were you great at negotiations? Were you known for that?
I was known for always asking questions. I was known for being really curious again, for always asking why, and then never being happy with the answer, and always asking why again, and
Mm,
digging, 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 digging. And yeah, and I guess that stood me in good stead when, many, many years later, I took up these opportunities. I could see the opportunities in different career points when I was in the police, particularly about taking up roles that gave me an opportunity to interact with people, particularly in stressful situations, and really look about how can we influence and persuade them.
mm. And how has this changed your life since you've gotten really good at this? How did you see that transform your life with your personal relationships?
I think it's given me a more empathetic grounding. Using emotional intelligence, it's enabled me to not take things personally at all, to be
Mm,
able to demonstrate an understanding of where I think that the person is at, and yeah, not get triggered into an emotive tit for tat, I'm right, you're wrong
mm.
kind of dialogue that can happen in relationships. I've learned this the hard way. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination. You've only got to ask my family that. Um, but I've learned the hard way, and I've got it wrong so many times that I now know what works,
Mm,
and can apply some of these tools and techniques. When I was with my kids, my partner, as well as clients and partners as well.
mm. No, it's interesting. I think that most people in their work, it is hard to completely transfer that to their home life. It's almost, the cobbler's kids have no shoes kind of effect, right? So I'm
Yeah.
always curious as to whether people are transferring that to their everyday life and how successful they are at doing that. I know nobody's perfect, but it sounds like you've learned to take the high road more than you used to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say the high road. I would say I've managed to develop an ability to take a step back and
Mm,
pause and then consciously respond rather than some kind of emotive knee-jerk reaction.
Take a second. Yeah.
80% of the time. There's still the
Right.
20% where
Yeah. You're human.
I'm human. I'm at 30,000 feet. The kids
Yeah.
have said something, or something's happened out in the wider world, or see something online, and I'm there. It's landed. But then, whereas before that may frustrate me for a few hours or a few days, now it's a few seconds.
Right. You're clearing it. You're processing it quicker.
Like, life is too short. I'm too busy. I've got a lot of stuff on. I'm enjoying my life. Why am I allowing that noise, which is all it is, to deflect or detract me from doing what I want to do?
Right.
And we've all got it's placed to all of us. We all have this agency and this responsibility and ownership of, right, where am I going to place my focus? And how am I going to respond to this? And what am I going to do as a result?
And it's usually a choice.
As opposed to I'm the victim, or this is happening to me. It's, well, actually, yeah, there may be external circumstances, but I get to choose now. So I might as well choose wisely moving forward.
Okay. Now, I found that that's the success, is not that things don't bother us, because that's like a resistance. It's that they flow through us quicker, that
Yeah.
we just release them quicker. So it's not like a blockage, because blocking stuff doesn't work, the block. So it sounds like you just learned how to let flow through and then release it quicker. Okay, awesome. So, Scott, this has been super interesting. What's one thing you want to leave people with? What's one idea or mindset piece that you want to leave people with that you find is really important?
Okay, there's two elements to this, really. One, it's understanding that you have something which I call the red center. You have this innate ability within you that no matter how challenging, how difficult, how overwhelming the circumstances, the situation you find yourself in, personally or professionally, you've got the ability to overcome it, to navigate through it. You just need to take control of it. You need to take the ownership, that responsibility, as I mentioned. And this red center, yes, it was a physical place we used to run the negotiations from. And externally, it could look like quite a chaotic place. But at the middle of it, where the two people, where we on our side and the kidnappers on their side were on the phone to each other, that was the oasis of calm. It was this belief that no matter what happens on that call, we're going to get through this and we're going to succeed. And metaphorically, and I guess literally, we have that within us as well, that mindset. And from that place, the second part is seek out the worthy opponents. Seek out those moments. Don't be afraid of those challenges, the problems, the issues, because the more you can deal with those, the easier life becomes, and you get the rewards and the results accordingly. Because most people will shy away from the difficulty. But if you can be forward leaning on the balls of your feet, so to speak, towards the challenge, towards the danger, towards the problems, you just expand that threshold of control, and you just become bigger, better, faster, stronger, more agile, better at communicating and negotiating with yourself and other people.
Awesome, because it's the opposite of what we just said. It's true that we do not seek out pain. And the reason why people are not on the balls of their feet for this is because they're trying to avoid pain. So really what you're saying is to stop avoiding pain at all costs and go for it and use it as a development tool.
Well, you can experience the pain, but there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is part of life, you know. We get stuck in traffic on the way to the airport. A loved one dies. We don't get the business deal. But what you don't want to do is allow that to define you.
Right.
To get in the way of you going, oh, okay, well, let me look at try and reframing this. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's sad. Yes, it's whatever in the moment. But I'm not going to dwell for an inordinate amount of time in something that doesn't need that.
Right.
And it depends on the context, of course. But it's about, rather than being flat-footed or on your heels, about to drown with a tsunami of overwhelm that's going to come crashing down over you, it's like, right, there's a problem, there's a challenge here. I'm going to go after it. And funnily enough, you bring a different energy to it. It feels easier rather than you being the victim of things happening to you, you're moving towards it and going, right, I'm going to be in control of what I do here. And there's a big difference there, and it makes a huge difference to the quality of your life as well, in my experience.
Oh, I love that. So it's like there's a problem to solve, treat it as such, take the bull by the horns, and it's a different energy instead of waiting around for things maybe to get better or worse. Like, okay, there's a problem, take the bull by the horns, get some control over it and process it. And there's power. I even when you were talking, I felt the energy was different. Like that's now a different energy. It's just a project. See how good I can do. Okay, that was awesome. Scott, thank you so much for turning up here. And thank you for listening. Please subscribe and share. And all things Scott will be in the show notes if you want to reach out to him and hear more about what he does. And also, what's the name of your book again?
Order Out of Chaos.
Order Out of Chaos. Go buy
book,
it.
and the website's winanynegotiation.com.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. See you on the next show. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.